Hey there, students. It's Mr. Sharp here again. Start with the next video for our series in colonization for Unit 1 on American History 1. So last time we were discussing about the establishment of the Southern colonies with this first one, Jamestown, and then a few years later talking about the first settlement in the New England territories, Plymouth colony, and how those two regions developed. Now we're going to be discussing how those middle colonies were eventually created later on, and how we come to decipher and distinguish the three different sections of the colonies in America. So as we go through, we're still going through that same essential question. Why do people move, and what are the voluntary and involuntary trends that we see throughout the colonization period? Not only that, but we're also going to see how some traits of the colonies are different than the others, depending on their culture, their climates, and what they produce. So with that, let's go ahead and move forward. So today we're going to be talking about mainly the push and pull factors of people that, or factors that pull settlers to the colonies from England and from Africa and from other places of the world. Not only that, but what are the pushing factors that kind of push them away? Remember that idea of what is voluntary and involuntary movements to the colonies, as well as the developments of some more tolerant colonies like over in Pennsylvania, where Quaker traditions are very accommodating for other people. So as we discussed last time, this is what northern colonies start to look like as we turn into the year of 1650. The Plymouth colony that started right here started to expand more into the now Massachusetts Bay colony with John Winthrop's leadership. Not only that, but we're also going to see a very small pocket of a new type of settlement, aside from just the French up here and the Spanish down in Florida. We're also going to see an influx of Dutch settlement, particularly right here, in a place you may have heard of before, in New York City. But it's not a city just yet. But, let me go back here. It's going to be called New Amsterdam once we start all the way up to the Hudson River, as they start to make their settlements here in what we now see as New York. As we go further, guys, I want you guys to make sure you follow along with me in your notes. This is your daily warm-up. Make sure you're capturing all this information that's going to be very critical for your quiz coming up, okay? With that being said, let's go ahead and talk about it. So as we talk about the middle colonies, we're talking about everything that's in between New England, the Massachusetts Bay colony, all the way in between to Jamestown and Virginia. So all the colonies that are in Pennsylvania, Delaware, New York, these are those big areas that have not really been colonized yet as to an extent by the English. They was mainly focused on the southern colonies, growing to tobacco and the plantation culture there, while in New England you have the settlements for religious freedom. While the middle colonies are going to stay relatively unchecked until we get an influx of Dutch and Swede immigrants coming to create their own small colonies. And they're going to rely pretty much on trade and being able to get resources to make their nations rich, keeping with that idea of mercantilism. So again, talking about the push and pull factors. Some of the push factors are going to be motivations for going. I'm wanting to go and leave my home because we're being persecuted home in the Netherlands, or sometimes in Germany or in Sweden. There's still the Protestant Reformation going on, and many arguments between Catholics and Protestants. That's going to push many people to seek religious freedom elsewhere. Not only that, but some pull factors that are going to attract people to the colonies. Like, I know over in the colonies, I could probably find a new spot of land that's cheaper. I can find a new way of living, so I'm probably going to find that. So those push and pull factors go into play. Remember, push being something that I want to get away from because it's bad, while pull being I want to go towards a newer and better future, or a better life. So with this, there's going to create tensions between the Netherlands and England as far as establishment and colonies in the New World. While ultimately England's going to win this fight in maintaining these colonies, there's still going to be the Dutch and Swedish cultures that thrive in these areas. It would eventually become to grow as the 1700s progress. So with that being said, let's see some of these pictures here that we're about to show you here. So this would have been an example of some Dutch settlers that come to the Hudson Bay area or the Hudson River area, and they'll create their own colony called New Amsterdam, which will eventually become New York City. And here's a map depicting of these areas that will become what we call the middle colonies. As you see, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and New York, they all will encompass the new section of the colonies called the middle colonies. And we're going to see more of their culture and how they're different between the New England colonies and the southern colonies. And some more pictures from New Amsterdam. These are some depictions of the land grants that were given in the New Amsterdam territory that would connect all the way up the Hudson River into Long Island, as you see down here at the bottom. That would be what we now see as New York. And if you cross the river over, you'll see this very first signs of settlement by the European settlers. And some ships that would have made their way over. And this is what ultimately helps the colonies become more diverse, not just for the Native Americans who are living there already, but for the influx of different Europeans that will come. So let's move from the New Amsterdam colony. Now let's move into another colony that will be established that's very unique, and that's Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania owes its existence to one particular man who was appointed by the King of England at the time, King Charles II. His name was William Penn, and he'll come and create a new colony, especially for people who wanted to seek religious freedom in a very unique section of Christianity that would come at this point called Quakers. So Quakers, they have a very strong faith in the Protestant Reformation. Not only that, but they see a lot of very radical ideas that would have been radical at the time, which we consider very moderate, and that was that both men and women could serve in equal representation and leadership in the church. Not only that, they were opposed to slavery. They were really against slavery, and they continued to be against slavery into later in American history. And not only that, they didn't like to see the gentry of England. They didn't see people as being higher than another. They saw people as equal in the eyes of God. So this is what ultimately creates the Quaker culture in Pennsylvania, and people are going to come to not seek money or gain profits, but to establish farms and communities within the Quaker culture and to build those church communities. So a handsome fellow right there, William Penn, who will ultimately be named the governor of Pennsylvania and help bring about the colony's prosperity. And a little bit more about the middle colonies here. Something that's very unique about the middle colonies is their tolerance for many different faiths and people who come, and not only that, but their relationship with the Native Americans. While we saw in the southern colonies of Jamestown, there would be clashes between the settlers and the Powhatan Nation, while in New England, there would be a huge amount of violence between the settlers and the Native American tribes living in New England. In the middle colonies, it was actually very peaceful. This is because the people of the middle colonies wanted to establish great relationships with the Native American tribes. Even though disease would eventually push Native American tribes away from colonial settlement, relationships stayed, for the most part, very good. In addition to that, it was more inviting in the middle colonies to accept people from Germany and from Sweden and from the Netherlands who wanted to escape religious persecution. In addition to that, there's also a very great climate in the middle colonies. It's not too cold like in the New England territories. It's not too hot and humid like in the South. It's a very mild climate, and it's good not for particularly grand scale plantation farming, but for subsistence farming to feed your family. So this would have been an ideal spot for somebody who wanted to settle and live in a community that was diverse and tolerant of other people, and who wanted to share and embrace other cultures and customs. And these are going to be features that we'll see again as we get towards the American Revolution, as colonists begin to seek religious freedom and know that it's wrong to impress other faiths and people who believe in different things. These are going to be traits that eventually evolve into revolutionary ideas before the American Revolutionary War. So as you guys are following along with me in your notes, make sure you're capturing these important details about the New Amsterdam colony in New York. Well, New Amsterdam, settled by the Dutch. In addition to that, William Penn and the Pennsylvania colony. Make sure you're capturing some details about that as well. And then what are the different details of the middle colonies in general? What's the climate like, the religious toleration, the relationship with Native Americans, and the economy? Is it a huge, booming plantation-style economy, or is it very poor and distraught? All right. So just to wrap things up, guys, here's a little slide graphic image for you to show you the 4 different states that would have been part of the middle colonies: New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. The different types of people that would settle there. We do see here that there's a multitude of different races and cultures that come into both the colonies. Yes, there were slaves that were brought to the middle colonies. However, it was not in large-scale numbers like in the South. So insignificant that by the time the American Revolution was over, most enslaved African Americans before the Revolution in the middle colonies were set free, and it was until the establishment of the Constitution that slavery would be eliminated in these colonies, and it was done relatively easy. So with that being said, the last part of your notes. Now we're going to encompass all 3 of the sections of the American colonies down into one graphic organizer to get you guys ready for tomorrow as we start to go through the next assignment for you guys. So, well, one section at the top, you've got the New England colonies. On the left side, you've got the middle colonies, and on the right, the southern colonies. Remember, the southern colonies being Jamestown all the way to Virginia, the Carolinas, Georgia, Maryland. New England being Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts Bay Colony. And then in the left, in the middle colonies, you've got Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, and Delaware. What are the differences and the similarities between the colonies? So for New England, you can talk about the settlers escaped to find religious freedom, particularly for separatists and Puritans. In the southern colonies, seeking profit through minerals and also through tobacco. For the middle colonies, seeking tolerant areas for people of different cultures in Europe. And you can talk about the differences. In the South, the climate is very humid, very hot, very good for farming on large scale. And New England is very cold and bitter, not really good for large scale farming. In the middle, it's like nice and sweet. It's the best place you want to be if you want to have a nice family farm. And then we can talk about the similarities. We can talk about how all colonies embraced slavery, more so than others with the southern colonies, but all colonies embraced slavery. The northern and middle colonies would eventually get rid of it after the American Revolution. And then the similarities between New England and middle colonies, similarities between the southern and New England colonies, and similarities between the middle and southern colonies. Make sure you're capturing all these boxes. And with that said, I hope you guys have a good day, and I'll see you again next time.